I'm Gary Null. Nice to have you with us today. We're going to talk about zinc for old people and why it's important. It'll let them live a lot longer and be a lot healthier. And helping heal the brain. One single chemical that is found in medical, the cannabinoids of marijuana helps with Alzheimer's. Now that does not mean smoking marijuana, and I'll get to that. I'll explain the difference between medical uses that have been shown to help with brain cancer and seizures and multiple sclerosis and Alzheimer's. That's an oil. That's an extract. That's a standard product. But it's not the smoking. And there are problems with the smoking that people have not recognized. So, yes, it's healing, it's powerful, but in the right way. And I'll give that insight today. And a lot of stuff on health and nutrition, always from quality peer-reviewed journals, to show you that what we in the alternative community present actually supports the best of independent science. Also today, I'll play you a clip that I watched last night of Dr. Suzanne Humphreys in Sweden, in Stockholm, making a presentation to a group of physicians, orthomolecular physicians, on vitamin C. Many of you in the audience know the power of vitamin C. Thousands of you have had your lives improved or actually saved based upon very high levels doses of vitamin C. I can't tell you how often I sat with people at the Tri-State Healing Center for 7 years, 7 nights a week, as they were getting infused with vitamin C and having wonderful discussions. Many of those people, if you're around today, you'll be happy to know that there's a lot more we now know. Now, why this particular clip is important, I'll play other parts of it later on. It's a 2-hour lecture. I'll play maybe 10 minutes today. Is because there's brand new research out showing how much vitamin C should we ideally have if we were using an animal model, meaning animals that produce vitamin C. How much do they produce per kilogram? 2.2 pounds of body weight. Far more than what we're consuming as children or adults. So we need a lot more vitamin C than what we've been using. Now, some of you in this listening right now around the world, I'm sure that you have been on a farm, lived on a farm. What is the one animal on a farm that almost never gets sick? It is the healthiest of all animals, the goat. Do you realize that a goat consumes upwards of 100,000 milligrams of vitamin C? It produces it. Why? And it's one of the things that keeps it at the top of the barnyard health, vitamin C. So you're going to hear Dr. Suzanne Humphreys. And of course, we always like to begin with health and nutrition because that impacts everyone listening. And one of the things we have found out is zinc, small little mineral, plays a very important role in our health. This is from Oregon State University. And they're saying that if you're deficient in it, which most Americans are, then you're going to have a negative immune system reaction. And if you're older, that's going to hurt you because that's going to stimulate inflammation. One of the things that happens with virtually all chronic diseases, we're talking about cardiovascular diseases, pulmonary diseases, your lungs, cancers, no matter where they are on the body, diabetes, virtually all of your itises, ileitis, Crohn's disease, colitis, spastic colon, the ulcers in the stomach, the arthritic joints, brain inflammation, all of those have inflammation as a primary causative factor. Now, it is a reaction to what you've drank or breathed or consumed. Zinc is important. Quote, when you take away zinc, the cells that control inflammation appear to activate and respond differently. This causes the cells to promote more inflammation. End quote. That was from Dr. Emily Ho, professor and director of the center at Oregon State University. So, what is the takeaway message? The message is that 12% of the entire American population are deficient in zinc. That's an awful lot of people. Zinc is an essential micronutrient. It's required for growth, for development, for neurological function, and for immunity, to keep you healthy. So take 15 to 20 milligrams a day of zinc. Also, from the University of Western Australia, vitamin D is vital for gene expression in developing brains. Quote, vitamin D deficiency in mothers leading up to and during pregnancy has fundamental consequences for their offspring's developing brain. So, what should we do? If you are pregnant, make sure that you're getting your recommended daily allowance of vitamin D plus. Why do I say plus? Because new research came out last week that showed that virtually all the calculations about how much vitamin D we need are wrong. They're wrong by about 300%. So instead of 2,000, it should be more likely 6,000 units of vitamin D a day. So get your vitamin D, and these are people that just didn't even have that amount, because it's going to impact the brain. Also, if you want to stop osteoporosis, which so many people in America have, according to Taiwanese scientists, they found after they checked 17,000 people, 70% of them had low bone density. That meant that they were going to have weak bones. Now in America, how many times have you heard, oh, someone fell and broke their hip? No. The hip spontaneously breaks and they fall because of it. We have brittle bones, mainly because we've been eating dairy products, which are not good for our bones. They're bad for our bones. And not taking vegetable sources of calcium and magnesium, which are better. And what else do you need more than any other nutrient? You need vitamin D3. And that's what this study found, that when you have low levels of vitamin D3 in your blood, you're more susceptible to osteoporosis, brittle bones. But also you want magnesium and calcium, phosphorus and boron, isoflavone, vitamin K2, and vitamin D3, and phosphorus. That's what you need. Now, where do you get that? You can get it from phytonutrients, kale, seaweed, collard greens, Swiss chard, spinach. Those are the sources we should be getting it. Sesame seeds. A lot of people have trouble sleeping. And if you live in New York City, it's because of the noise. I use earplugs. When I travel on a plane, you should use them, but also to keep out outside noise. Here's what works best. This is based upon a new study where they looked at everything that could allow you to have a better night's sleep. What did they find? They found melatonin. Mela, M-E-L-A, tonin, T-O-N-I-N. It is the nutrient that is secreted from your pineal gland. That's a tiny little grape seed size gland in the middle of your brain. And that allows you to sleep even in noisy conditions. This is according to Science magazine. So, I would suggest starting with 1 milligram and see how you do for a week. If it doesn't work, go to 2 milligrams. You could go up to 3 or 4 milligrams safely, and that can make a difference. Now, another thing that vitamin D does, now we've seen it helps with osteoporosis, it helps with better sleep, but how about for the millions of Americans who are depressed? According to a new article in Psychiatry Research, they have found an association between depression in young women and low levels of vitamin D. That's D3. Also in vitamin C. So, if you want to have a greater capacity for emotional balance without depression, get your vitamin D3. And also the pear. Now, we know pear's got great fiber. The Comus pear is my favorite pear because it's juicy and get it cold and it's just delicious. And if you juice it, it's just spectacular. And you put a little mint in it. So if you've ever... And Comus is not available year-round, but when you do get it, if you peel off the skin, you cube it, make sure it's been refrigerated, you throw it in a blender, and then you put some sprigs of mint in and some water, mineral water, It's spectacular. Best thing to quench your thirst. But now we found out it does something else that we didn't know about. This is brand new science from the University of Massachusetts. And it says the following, quote, scientists led by Dr. Sarkar, University of Massachusetts, analyzed the pulp and skin of two varieties of pear, including the most common in America, the Bartlett pear, and the other one is the Stark Crimson, and they found probiotic. Who knew that the pear could help balance gut microbiota? And especially when it came to type 2 diabetes and hypertension. They investigated whether whole pear juice, fermented, could have probiotic beneficial effects in inhibiting the growth of Helicobacter, what we call H. pylori, and that promotes stomach ulcers and cancer. And they found that it did, but it had also tremendous benefit for the management of type 2 diabetes and hypertension. So let's just summarize what we're getting when we have the phenolic and antioxidant contents of a pear. By the way, there are 3,000 varieties of pears. We found that it can inhibit H. pylori with 48 to 72 hours. So what would I do? I would take the Bartlett pear, juice it, and then juice some cabbage juice, and put those two together with vitamin C. That would be the best thing I could suggest for stomach ulcers, stomach cancer, and that, because the best thing I ever recommend for people who have stomach problems is cabbage juice. Sauerkraut juice would be behind it. So you could do those two. So you're getting probiotics. That's terrific for it. But it also can help with blood pressure and diabetes. So all those are good. And finally, there's a lot to be said about the benefits of essential oils, because according to some interesting studies in natural health, we are now suffering from antibiotic resistance. We know that. We overuse antibiotics. We use them for a lot of conditions that they're not even indicated. So the overuse of antibiotics in animal foods, you have it in dairy, you have it in meat, then it ends up in your body. And then when you do have a case where you need an antibiotic, it may not work. And the costs of antibiotic resistance are very high. We know of antibiotic-resistant bacteria caused over 2 million illnesses last year in the United States, 23,000 deaths. So when you have that many that are known to have died, known to have infected, you got to multiply that by 10. So we probably had over 200,000 people who in the hospital, no one realized it. They had also antibiotic resistance. So here's where intelligent alternatives to antibiotics come out. The essential oils. There was an Italian study discovered that a mixture of thyme and clove essential oils was equally as effective at treating bacterial vaginosis as traditional antibiotics. Another study, just a year and a half ago, clearly demonstrated staph wounds healing more quickly with tea tree oil vapor than regular antibiotics. Another study published in Tropical Journal of Pharmaceutical Research showed lemongrass oil in a hand gel got rid of MRSA. And MRSA is one of the most deadly bacteria in the world. It kills thousands of people. So just think, you have MRSA, MRSA, and it kills people, and here is a simple lemongrass oil that kills it with no harmful effects. Of course, we always have known about wild oregano oil. That's terrific. And peppermint oil and cinnamon oil. So we should have all these in our home. You never know when you're going to need them. So the essential oils, there are books on it, there are articles on it, and I've published a big article on the healing power of essential oils on our website today. So that's the latest in health and healing. And when we come back, we're going to go right into a lecture by Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, medical doctor, who is going to quote a man that I once communicated with when I started doing some work on vitamin C, and he had done the most work of anyone that I could find in America on vitamin C at the highest doses. No doctor I knew was willing to use more than 1,000 milligrams vitamin C. This guy was using 50,000 units, 50,000 milligrams, with spectacular results. Very orthodox doctor, Dr. Frederick Klenner. You'll hear his name come up here in his research. It was Linus Pauling who looked at his work. But then we took it from 50 to 200,000 milligrams. And that's where we were able to reverse AIDS-related illnesses, advanced cancers. Our medical team was just shocked. But we work with thousands of people. It's a matter of record. And yet no one picked up on it. No one wanted to go there. So we're going to see what she has to say about vitamin C. It'll be very enlightening. You won't want to miss this. Now, Dr. Suzanne Humphreys in Stockholm, Sweden, lecturing before the Orthomolecular Medical Society.
There is a lot of mythology in the conventional medical realm that trickles down and moves into society. And this mythology is mythology that I used to believe, and that is that vitamin C is, it's necessary to prevent scurvy, but it isn't really necessary to be given in any higher doses than we get in our food necessarily today. Well, I found this not to be true, not only for my patients and for myself, but the medical literature and some alternative literature really supports that these myths are actually not true. One of the myths that you'll hear often from conventional doctors is that doses over 1,000 milligrams are dangerous and wasteful and just gives you expensive urine. We hear that the body becomes saturated if you take 150 milligrams, so no use taking any more. We hear that kidney stones can be a big problem, and we have to be on the alert not to develop kidney stones. We hear that there is no science behind high ascorbate use, despite the fact that Nobel Prize-winning scientists have shown that there is science and there's ongoing science for the use. We hear often that natural whole vitamin C is always the best thing to be used. Now, food is always the best thing to be used first, but when you're really very sick, you will not get enough vitamin C from your food. Okay, I'm seeing nods. So, and the other thing is that we can get diarrhea from high doses of ascorbate, and we hear that this is dangerous and we can kill little babies and cause bowel necrosis. None of this is true. None of this has ever been proven clinically or scientifically. We also hear that you can get enough from food when you are very ill, and that also is not true. So animals use 4 sequential liver enzymes to convert glucose, it's very simple actually, into another chemical, which has this fancy name right there, and it is called 2-keto-L-gulonolactone. You don't need to know that. But then that shape shifts automatically into L-ascorbic acid, and this is the magic chemical that has so many functions in our body that enhance our health and can be very life-saving in certain situations and can be consumed very rapidly during illness. This enzyme right here, number 4, is missing from human beings and some other animals, some bats, some guinea pigs, and some primates. The gene that codes for it is present in humans, but it just doesn't work. We don't know why. So human beings and these other animals are dependent upon the food source in order to have this life-saving nutrient. So let's take a look now at animals that make their own vitamin C. If we look at a cow will make 18 milligrams per kilogram per day, and they will take in a total of around 12,000 milligrams, plus all that they're getting around here as well, okay? So he's making 12,000, or she, and also eating the grass and the greens, which have more vitamin C. Then we can look at cats. They make their own, 20 to 40 milligrams per kilogram per day, for a total of around 180 milligrams per day intake. Production. Now, mind you, the recommended dietary allowance for me is half of that, about, okay? All right, so now let's look at animals that are dependent upon the environment for vitamin C because they cannot manufacture their own. If we look at a wild gorilla, we'll eat approximately 30 milligrams per kilogram per day for around 4,500 milligrams. If we look at the guinea pig, the classic animal that does not make vitamin C, which I believe is why this makes actually a good lab animal to do research looking for illnesses in humans, is because they also don't make their own vitamin C. And they'll take about 30 milligrams per day, and again, about 33 milligrams per kilogram per day. So it's my belief that this is actually a good place to start in estimating what our baseline requirements are, even as human beings, 30 milligrams per kilogram per day, approximately. Now, this is me on a farm in New Zealand with 2 goats, the baby and the mother. And I found out interesting information about goats, and that is that when goats are healthy, they make 185 milligrams per kilogram per day. And when they are stressed, they can make up to 1,400 milligrams per kilogram per day, for a total of around 100,000 milligrams, okay? And one day the veterinarian came out to the farm to deal with some problems with the other animals, and he volunteered to us that goats hardly ever get sick. And when they do get sick, it's usually something so bad that it kills them. So that is, I think, very interesting anecdotal information. Now, I make none of my own vitamin C, and I am told that I only need 75 milligrams per day, and that's about 1.2 milligram per kilogram per day. So as you can see, there's something very wrong with the estimation that we as human beings need, even when we compare ourselves to animals who make their own and animals who are dependent. It's a gross underestimation of our actual need. Now, there were problems with how these estimates for human beings were made, and I don't really have time to get into that, but briefly, it was done just on a few healthy men and women, very small group, and they looked at the wrong kind of cells in order to make this estimation of what we need. So the science behind this estimate is flawed, and some scientists came along later and said, no, 200 milligrams per day, and the authorities rejected that, even 200, so they still say 75 to 90, for 90 for man, 75 for woman, and if I'm a smoker, they say add 35 milligrams. Well, I'll tell you that one cigarette uses 25 milligrams of vitamin C. So you can see if I'm smoking 10 cigarettes per day, I'm already tapping into my reserves of vitamin C. Okay, so I just want to emphasize that simply preventing scurvy is not the same as promoting optimal health. These levels here that they're telling us is for preventing scurvy, and they're still rather inaccurate because if one is to develop, say, influenza or a whooping cough, those reserves can be depleted very rapidly. Okay, so I looked around to see if anybody studied the levels in the blood of vitamin C in people and what it is. And I found this study from Canada, and they looked at people who were coming in and out of hospital to have their blood drawn. So they might be a little bit sick because they're probably, getting blood tests. But this was what they found, is that 84% they said was normal. This 23% they said subnormal, and only 11.4% they called deficient. Now, what they call normal, I don't call normal, because they're calling greater than 28.4 normal. I believe that 100 to 125 is probably closer to normal, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I think more than this is actually walking around with low levels. But let's look at the difference now in patients who are in hospital and ill. What we find is that there's much more of them that are subnormal, 60% subnormal. 19% are called deficient, which is very, very low level here, 11.4 micromole per liter, and only 21% considered normal by their very low standards. And if we look at this graph at the bottom, it shows that the hospitalized patients are the black bars, and the outpatients are the clear bars. And you can expect some overlap. But what I want to point out is that both of these groups had some people that were up around 100 or 125. And this, in addition to other literature that I have read and the dynamics of vitamin C in the body, is what leads me to say I believe this is a better range for us to live in. 100, 125, even 150 is easily possible with repeated either high diet with this nutrient or with repeated doses of various forms. So this study concluded and said that nearly 1 in 5 had plasma vitamin C concentration consistent with scurvy. And even more disturbing to me was that 24% of these people, when they went into hospital, were taking vitamins, and doctors discontinued most of it when they were admitted to hospital. So I wonder to myself now if conventional doctors even knew about this, if they would do anything about it, because we still are living with this myth that we don't need to look at vitamin C levels in sick people and we don't need to supplement, although that is changing. But there was a doctor, even back as far as 1950s, who had a rather interesting comment to make about his colleagues. This is Dr. Frederick Klenner, who was one of the pioneers of using high doses of ascorbate, and he cured many of the most atrocious diseases in the 1950s, including polio, and this black widow spider bite, which he gives a detailed case history. And in this case history, he says that there are some physicians who would stand by and watch the patient die rather than use this vitamin C, because they're still thinking that it exists only as a vitamin. And it is much more than a vitamin, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. So there's another interesting study here, because it basically just works with food, with some kiwi fruits. And this is a study from New Zealand, and they got some adult males around 30 years old, healthy, and they wanted to see what the vitamin C levels in the muscle were. So they volunteered for this horrible muscle biopsies, but we got some interesting information. They started by just measuring their levels, their blood levels, and they found that they're pretty much on the low end of normal. 30 to 40 was their range when they started. Then they said, just consume a diet low in vitamin C and stop supplements. And look, it dropped down, within 5 weeks, dropped down almost to levels of scurvy. And then they said to half of them, you take 1/2 of a kiwi fruit per day, and the other half eat 2 kiwi fruits per day, and then we'll see what happens to your levels. And interestingly is that they were able to rise these levels fairly high just with 2 kiwi fruits per day, up to 70. And even the half kiwi fruit had a pretty good effect in the muscle. Okay? Now mind you, different parts of our bodies need different amounts of vitamin C. The adrenal gland and the eye need very high amounts, for instance. Muscle is somewhere in between. So this is just an interesting study that shows you that if we did eat a minimum of 5 fruits and vegetables per day that has vitamin C in it, that most of us could have pretty good levels, assuming they're not sprayed with pesticides and they're fairly fresh and we're not smoking and being exposed to dangerous chemicals. So you can divide the need for vitamin C into 2 categories. And it can be the everyday needs, like detoxifying chemicals like car fumes, like preventing damage from environmental sprays, or from any poison, because vitamin C acts as an electron donor. And what those electrons does is fixes the damage that's done by these oxidative stress. And I'll give you more detail about that in a moment. So that's why vitamin C is called antioxidant.
Now, we'll continue with her comments tomorrow. And I'll add in that what she's going to share is very important. But there's a new model that I believe will take it even to a much greater level, and I'll share that with you about how do you know how much you need. And I'll explain it's based upon your stress, the toxic reactions to your environment, how much you have already done to repair the damage, or maybe you haven't done anything, in which case, how much vitamin C do you need? And because we've seen the clinical evidence as well as laboratory studies, will give you a much better, more accurate amount of vitamin C per day. But it's in the thousands of milligrams, not 70 milligrams. And it's closer to what a gorilla would get. But remember, a gorilla is not living the same life exposed to the same chemicals and stressors that we are. Therefore, that stress really increases the amount of vitamin C that our human being needs. More from Dr. Suzanne Humphreys on tomorrow's program.